Good afternoon, everybody. We've been told not to change horses. I've changed horses so many times in the last 24 hours. I have no idea what's going to come out. I kind of do. Fuck. Sometimes that's what I think about my life. We don't think often in our culture about where these patterns of behavior that we all want to disrupt come from. But I've delved into my story, and I know where they come from. My mom was raped from the time she was 7 to the time she was 14 by an uncle. The family response was, "It's okay, you shouldn't have been born anyway." My father was pinned underneath a hay baler when he fell off the back of a tractor, and his dad drove over him and parked the hay baler there for several minutes while the wife, my grandmother, was screaming at my grandfather. And when my grandfather figured out that he had driven over his youngest son, he jumped back on the tractor, started it up, pulled the hay baler off, scooped up his son, and rushed him to emergency. Those are defining moments for my parents when they were very young. And those traumas stayed in their bodies and never got resolved. And so my life was always in crisis: financial, emotional, spiritual, mental, physical. I carried those traumas with me because they were imprinted onto me as a child. The fear, the anxiety, the stress, the nervousness, the pain, the suffering, the uncertainty. I carried them with me. And they're still there. They're still with me. They still run my life. They still run my programs, but they don't run my whole life anymore. And what we've lost in our culture is the ability to grieve. We've lost initiations. We've lost ceremony. We've lost the ability to mark the significant things in our lives that help us move forward and resolve trauma. And so from the time that I was very young, I committed myself to one thing. Not this. Not this. I will not repeat this. The sins of the fathers get passed down to the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and even the seventh generation. And I said, fuck it! I'm done. It ends here. My dad's gone. I lost him to Parkinson's. But before he left, I learned to understand his story. I learned to understand the things that had happened to him, the stories that were told about him, the stories that were told to him, and the stories that he might have told himself. And by the time I started trying to figure this out, the level of conversation that we could have was very limited because Parkinson's had already taken most of what made him him. So I've resolved my issues with my father. My mother, I got her into an intermittent fasting program. She struggled with weight and diet her entire life, and her identity is changing. The loss of my father has freed her to explore who she is. My sister and I went to the P&E, and we spent the whole time going on rides, laughing. I challenged her to push her comfort zone, and we talked about love languages. That conversation helped us to understand each other. And she finally dropped decades of rivalry and bitterness and hurt. Dropped out of that story, dropped into the man that I've become. And I'd like to share that with you.
Can I agree with me, Curtis? You are a rock star speaker. 1, 2, 3.
Curtis, you are a rock star speaker.